Over the past 3 years, I've been on the most significant mental health journey of my life. While that has significantly improved my mental health, I still strive for self-improvement. I still struggle with poor habits, productivity, and focus, and I'd like to share with you the methods and steps that I've taken in order to improve those areas. Welcome to the channel. My name is Nick, also known as Dunnderhead. Let's talk about the steps and methods I've used to create better habits. First things first, I am by no means a minimalist, but I am cheap as hell, and the concept of minimalism for that reason has really intrigued me. But that isn't the main concept of what minimalism is. Minimalism is about living with less in order to have more time and space for the things that are important to you. So I grew up in a house that constantly had way too many things in it, and it all cluttered the house in the same way that it made my mind feel cluttered. And I didn't notice the correlation until I had moved out, and I just wanted less and less things in order to have my mind not feel like it's being pulled in 7 different directions. From too many dishes to too many clothes and hobbies to store away, I just found that I wanted to decrease the number of things I had in order to prevent myself from having to do too many dishes or put away and store too many things. So long story short, I sold a lot of things, I gave them away, I threw them away in order to declutter my space and at the same time declutter my mind. And ultimately it worked, it just wasn't quite enough. So if it isn't clear already, I am an ADHD and anxiety-ridden human being. And that 1-2 combo has a tendency to make it difficult for me to stick to set plans, but also really struggle when set plans change. So at the beginning of my therapy journey, my therapist had given me the task to set up my day and plan my day down to when I watch TV, when I play video games, when I ate, when I sleep, in order to help me not feel as anxious, but also follow the set plan. I started out on this task pretty strong, but the issues came up relatively quickly. It didn't really make me feel any better. I wasn't getting tasks done more consistently, and I constantly found myself just not wanting to do it and eventually just stopped. The main purpose of this task was in order to help rid me of a little bit of anxiety about the things that were coming up in my day, but also give me a set list of things that I needed to get done and time hacks that I needed to hit in order to get specific tasks done throughout the day, especially around my photography business at the time. Despite this not working for me, eventually I did find that I learned from this specific task that if I couldn't follow this set plan and do this every day, and this isn't what I wanted to do, I needed to feel different about how I went about my day. So the anxiety started to decrease when I started living more of a go with the flow, day-to-day lifestyle. And this realization I'm very grateful to have. Video journaling is another tool that I used at the beginning of my therapy journey. Up until very recently, I wasn't a huge fan of writing. And at the time, it just didn't feel like I was able to get my thoughts and feelings onto the paper. It felt like I wasn't able to just really release the feelings and thoughts and emotions that I was going through at the time. At that time, I was going through the most painful breakup I had been dealing with in my life. And I just didn't feel like writing those emotions down was going to give me the release that I needed. Now, I had already been creating content and was kind of comfortable talking to the camera, so video journaling seemed like a very usable option. However, video journaling and how I used it was more for the emotional and mental side of self-improvement than the productivity and habit side. But what it did for me was I would record the video talking to the camera. Afterwards, I would watch it back immediately. Essentially, it felt like I was talking to myself and talking about those feelings. Eventually, I made the realization that it felt like what was happening was I was trapping those feelings and that past self behind the glass on the screen of my phone. I was looking at my past self, and now those past emotions trapped behind that screen, and that really helped me move past the pain I was feeling at the time. Now, using a whiteboard and a pad of sticky notes is a little bit more on the productivity and habit side. However, both of them served separate purposes at the time. The whiteboard was more for memory-related tasks and events, and the sticky notes themselves were more towards productivity and habits. For the whiteboard, I would write down events that were coming up or that needed to happen, and as they came up, I would erase them and write down new events. However, what I did end up trying was I did try using the whiteboard to put tasks down, and the rule was I was supposed to complete a task, erase it, and then I could put a new task on the whiteboard. The problem was I was just putting tasks on the whiteboard, filling up the whiteboard, and not actually erasing any of them in order to create new tasks. Eventually the whiteboard filled up, and then I couldn't add new tasks, so those tasks would just go for, I would forget them. In came the sticky notes to replace that issue. The problem is I hate sticky notes. For me personally, sticky notes are a prime example of what clutter looks like in my brain. Sticky notes in abundance, to me, looks like on a crime show when they have the bulletin board with all of the red string attached to it. But my brain looks at an abundance of sticky notes, just a clump of sticky notes, and feels like I'm not solving the crime. So at the time, I tried to use that mentality as a motivator, and essentially what I did was I would write tasks down on these sticky notes, slap them on my wall, and in order to remove the clutter of sticky notes, I had to complete the task. I complete a task, I get to take it off the wall. Simple concept. Unfortunately, at that time, I then came into a significant depressive episode. That caused me to really only meet my basic needs at the time in order to survive. And unfortunately, I just didn't get much else done. And because of this, my brain eventually kind of just accepted that the sticky notes were on the wall, and that thought process of them being clutter and me wanting them off the wall just didn't work anymore. However, fast forward to now, I now only use one sticky note at a time, and that is strictly for my to-do list for the day. And that daily to-do list has been working pretty well. This concept for me is a little bit of a double-edged sword. And what I mean is removing friction and removing work from play can be beneficial. I also really like tech gear and other gadgets, and I find I buy more of them in order to remove friction in areas where it just makes tasks a little bit easier, so I don't have to set up and take things down. Tech gadget addiction aside, my main issue was separating work from play. I play Magic the Gathering, go figure, nerd, and I find fiddling with my cards and building decks to be very relaxing, and I use it as a decompression technique all the time. The problem with Magic cards, especially when you're building multiple decks and fiddling with your cards and organizing, they end up everywhere. Now again, related to clutter, I would have my desk set up and I would be playing with my cards, fiddling with my cards all over my desk, and then they would begin to clutter the desk, making a massive barrier or friction point that would cause me to not be able to get work done. The problem was I would have to clean them all up, and after cleaning all of them up, any momentum or motivation I had to get work done would have been used up on cleaning them all up and putting them back where they needed to go. So with that, I made a rule that Magic cards are never, ever, ever allowed to touch this desk. They never touch the desk, so I never have to worry about cleaning up, thus removing the friction point. It's no surprise that our phones are useful tools in our daily lives, and it's equally no surprise that they're also massive distractions. I do have a lot of tools and tips on how to use your phone as a tool for productivity. That's for a separate video, and I'll put that up someday. However, a few things I do to decrease distractions with my phone: setting up app timers, removing apps entirely, certain automations and routines, and simply changing my phone to silent mode. And another small one that I do is I also set my phone screen to black and white when I'm working. in order to not get as much of the stimulation that you would get from watching videos and scrolling through other social media apps. Short form content is a huge detriment to my productivity and mental health. At this time, I've deleted TikTok off my phone. I've set up app timers on YouTube, on Instagram, on Facebook to kind of keep myself off of social media to a certain amount of time throughout the day. Once those app timers are depleted, I cannot use those apps. I cannot access them until the next day. I also recently discovered on YouTube, you can actually remove the Shorts feed from your homepage. This might not be the same for Apple, but on Android, there's now 3 little dots that are on the side of the Shorts feed that you can click and hide the Shorts feed from your homepage. Now, I also have a lot of shortcuts and automations that I use on my phone in order to decrease distractions and increase productivity. I have a few set based on time, location, and depending on what apps are open. I primarily have 2 locations set. I have one being my truck, which basically just sets it to a mode that doesn't allow me to have distractions while I'm driving. And the second one being when I'm home. When I'm home, I have time-based automations. To start the day, I have my alarm go off at 7. If it's a slow day and I'm really not, if I slept like garbage, it'll go off again at 8. So typically between 7 and 8 or 8 to 9 is my morning routine. I'll check my habit tracker and then make sure that I make the bed, brush my teeth, get a little bit of exercise. Typically between 8 and 9 is the second half of my morning routine, which consists of checking off those things in my habit tracker and writing my to-do list on a sticky note that I then plant to my desk, and then I go through, I make sure that I get some of those tasks done that need to happen before I start working. Typically, I'll number those tasks by priority. I'll write the tasks down first, and then I'll see what needs to be done first. Between 9 and 12, my phone automatically will grayscale my screen, so turn it black and white. It'll set a 3-hour timer, and it'll change my phone to silent mode. Between 9 and 12 is strictly dedicated work time on the weekdays. Following noontime, I'll typically grab lunch, and then I will start prepping for my stream that is typically from 2 to 6. You should come join us, by the way. It's a good time. My next automation doesn't start until 9 o'clock. Between 9 and 10 is bedtime routine. 9 o'clock, I take my meds and I work on either my journal or I write down the tasks that I need to do tomorrow. Following 10 p.m. is bedtime. I don't typically fall asleep at that time, but that is the time that my phone will decrease brightness. It'll switch to silent mode, and typically that'll all stay that way until 6 a.m. A little bonus tip for when you're working. I just started this recently. I have a little sports clicker that I tactically acquired on accident from my time in the military. Every time I get distracted when I'm working, I'll click it once. And the idea is every time that number goes up is the number of times that I was distracted. But I try to look at it as more of that's the number of times that I redirected myself after getting distracted. So I'm creating the habit of redirecting myself more often. It's all about putting a positive spin on these things in order to get yourself to do them more. But the point is, as simple and as dumb as it kind of is, it's actually worked a little bit to help keep me on task. Now, for any of you who saw my last video, I talked a lot about my new habit tracker. This has been the most effective tool and method out of all of the ones that I've just listed, and it has genuinely changed my life in less than 30 days. I won't go too in depth on that here though. If you'd like to hear more about that, check out this video over here to hear about why it's made such a difference in my life. Thanks for watching. I hope to catch some of you guys on stream.